Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. So in today's live, I'll be going over the damage and what happened in Hawaii during the Kona Low Storms. There were a series of them. And then we're also going to talk about the massive fire going on in Nebraska. And then we'll close out with the explosion and fire that is, I believe, is currently still happening in Port Arthur in Texas. It's the largest oil refinery in the US. So we'll wait a little bit for people to join. And if you want to put where you're watching from, Shane will be putting the areas up. Oh, hi, Carl. Oh, brush junkie. Thank you. Oh, Upper Puna, the first wave knocked down 4 old growth sacred ohia trees, over 200 years old. Yeah, so I know the Big Island, Maui, Oahu, Molokai, and I believe all of the islands got significant damage. I'm not going to be able to cover all of the islands. First of all, I don't know all of the islands very well. I'm going to mainly talk about Oahu because that's where I'm from. That's the area that I understand. I understand like the topography, the climate, how storms affect certain areas and things like that. So I'm going to just talk about the effects on Oahu, but has nothing to do with the other islands. It's just my knowledge is not very strong with like Maui and the Big Island. But I know it is affecting all of the islands. And from France, Chamon, I don't even know how to say that. Chamoni. Sorry if I said that wrong, but someone from France. I don't have a lot of people tuning in from France. And Lassen County, California. Okay, so, and the Nebraska fire. Yeah, we're going to cover that. We'll be doing that after the Kona Low Storm. And from Norway. Okay, I'm going to get started. Today is technically a spring break day. So I have, my kids are home. And so I have a lot going on in my house. I didn't realize today was the start. And so I thought I had the house to myself. Anyways, all right, let me start out with the map of Oahu. I put some personal pictures in here I'll show just for fun. Shane, should I go over just the basics of like the rain? I did a previous video. I'll just go over them really, really briefly because I did go over this in my previous Kona Low video, but just how unprecedented the amount of rainfall is. It's more than Helene dropped on Tennessee, North Carolina. And Shane, correct me if I'm wrong if I say anything wrong, but this is what I remember. So yeah, this is unprecedented rainfall. The storm system is called a Kona Low, which is a fairly new term. So it's a fairly new storm system. This is the interest in Google searches over time. And so it didn't really start getting searched for till 2010. And there is a ship called the Friendship. It's I don't know if we call this a bunker, but one of these huge ships that are built to carry cargo on. And this was seen kind of idling in the Pacific, in the area that the storm was coming from. So we believe that there was some kind of involvement of this ship because the call sign is can you read that, Shane? Sorry, I can't even read that.
Okay, it says 8675309. It's hard to read in either of these images, but it does show in both of these, but it's just really small.
Okay, and the destination is we go to
We go on
Mars.
Mars. We go on Mars is the destination.
Is that
Yeah, and
right?
the call sign. Yeah, and the call sign is
Okay.
867-5309. So neither of those are actually legitimate or valid. So the destination is not valid, and neither is the call sign.
And someone pointed out, I think in your video, that the Mars reference kind of makes them think of Musk. And I thought that was a good
Yeah,
comparison.
it is kind of reminiscent of Musk, especially if this is another uncrewed autonomous ship. I can't prove that, so I'm really not sure. But I know we have seen uncrewed autonomous bunker ships in the past, like in Hurricane Melissa.
Yeah. Okay. So before I go into like what happened, just show the land spouts because these are very unusual in Hawaii. Do you want to just show those real quick
Oh,
before?
sure. Okay. Yeah. So these are a type of vortex that occur over land. They're very similar to water spouts, but they're called land spouts. And this one was actually spotted over central Maui, which is kind of odd because it was in the center of the island, nowhere near the coast, which is the same case for this one that was seen on Big Island as well. Saddle Road is also relatively far inland from the coast. So it's a really weird place to find land spouts. You usually will see water spouts or land spouts near the coast, but these were at significant elevations. So that kind of makes them anomalies.
And we saw water spouts out off the shore of Lahaina, like right when the fire was starting, which to me is unusual. And then I saw some comments saying that it's not, but this type of like vortex type winds, I've never heard or seen anything like that. So, oh, from Haleiwa, that's one of the areas we're going to talk about, and I have some clips from the meeting in that area. Okay, but I'll start out. I'll explain kind of how things rolled out on Oahu, at least, and why it might have happened the way it did. It didn't affect the island evenly. Some areas were hit much, much harder. And the reason is the island is made, and so this is just Oahu. This is where I'm from, so that's why I want to speak on this. I remember the weather and how it changed very quickly, and I understand this pretty well. So the island's made up of two main mountain ranges. The Ko'olau is on the east; it's the major one, it's the longer one, and the Waianae mountain range is on the west. So, what happens when the trade winds hit the islands? They normally come from the northeast, and then they hit the Ko'olau mountain range and they dump all that rain on the windward side. So, where you see like Kaneohe, Kailua, Waimanalo, that's called the windward side. It's more rainy and it's also more windy than the leeward side, which is on the other side of the mountain range. So that's where Honolulu Pearl Harbor is. It does rain in those areas, it's just not as much. So, if we're looking at this from the perspective of wanting to affect certain areas, it's going to depend on the topography. So, for example, the wind, the winds did come from the south. They kind of came from the southwest going north. And so that is typically not how the winds go around the Hawaiian Islands. And I'll show from the 16th on, this is from the website Windy. And there's an app, you can look this up. So here's the 16th, and you'll see that the winds throughout the week are going to shift. So yeah, it's starting to come more from the east, which this is kind of normal where it is right now. But then around like the 18th, 19th, it's going to start shifting. So this is pretty quick. Like for it to change so much within a day or two is not how I remember the winds changing when I lived there. They were pretty consistent from what I remember. So right here, you see it's coming basically directly north. It's going north almost directly. And so it's hitting areas that don't normally get a lot of rainfall. And so it seems like they were just hitting the islands from every direction they could. and from areas that they normally wouldn't come from with the normal trade winds. And so here's the worst part. This is where Honolulu got hit the 21st, 22nd, and then it starts coming back heading south. And then it's going to start to kind of normalize and go to the more typical wind pattern. And you can go to this site. I'll link it after this live so you could see for yourself. You can also look at the precipitation and the current winds and the forecast as well. So I thought this was a really helpful site to see if you want to see what actually happened. And it's very pretty user friendly. I thought I had to look up some of the terms, but it wasn't too hard to figure out. And this allowed me to kind of understand why things happened the way they did. So okay, after this is done, I'm going to take this down. I'm going to show some of the damage. And I'm going to speak more to the areas that I'm familiar with. And then I'll go into the more like the political reaction that has been more recent and the how the community has been reacting to the not just the warnings or lack of warnings, but the I guess the beginning of the recovery stage. So Manoa is a valley in Honolulu. So this is an old area. It's very highly populated. And I spent a lot of time in Manoa. I went to school here and I have family that lives here. So I'm familiar with this stream. But this is an older area. I feel like it was probably developed like, the 30s, maybe 40s, 50s. And they did get a lot of damage. But Manoa, a lot of it is built in the mountains. So I feel like if you're in a higher elevation, you're not going to get hit as hard as you do if you're in the lower areas. So this is Woodlawn Boulevard, which is one of the main streets in Manoa. So I just wanted to give an idea of what kind of damage we're seeing with this particular storm. So you can see that all that debris, it looks more like trees and branches got to their house. But a lot of houses said they have a lot of mud in their house, but mainly it's like going to be water damage. That's going to be very difficult to repair. And here's some of the amount of water that fell. So the amount of water that fell in such a short period of time is what causes those flash floods. And, because Hawaii is so mountainous and they're all very steep mountains, they come down really fast. And so they can come out of what it seems like it comes out of nowhere. I forgot what part. I think this might be North Shore, but the water did get really high. Not the way it did in Helene. I mean, Helene, we're looking at like 18-foot storm surges. So that was different because the topography is different, but the water did get really high. I haven't heard of any fatalities, but I'm starting to hear that there are people in like the Wailua area that are being rescued still, that are trapped in their homes and they can't get out. So
I believe
again,
there's one missing on Maui.
Okay, one missing, and they're I think currently still rescuing. At least that's what I heard the last report. So a lot of cars get destroyed, and I feel like this is something that they welcome. Less cars, the better. And then I just wanted to show this because this is just so unbelievable. But I think this is in Kaimuki, but I can't just show it. Yeah, I think that was too late to reverse, bro.
I don't think his car's going to be okay.
Yeah. But I don't remember it ever flooding like this in Hawaii. I remember times when rain fell really hard for extended periods of time, What that might be, I grew up in an area called Kahalu. I found some pictures of my house that I grew up in. So that's the yard that I grew up in. That's my mom and me. I was probably like 5. And so we lived right at the base of the Kona Low Mountains, and that's what you see in the background there. And they're very steep mountains. When it rains, you see waterfalls right away. I live right next to the Buddhist temple there. And something that I spent a lot of time doing as a child, I grew up in the 80s and 90s before computers. I used to walk down the streams. A stream went directly behind my house. It was actually the dividing line between our property and the next property. And I would, for fun, follow it down as far as I can go. And there's tons of these, we call them streams, but they're man-made uh, drainage structures, and they're massive. And so I feel like certain areas, like Kaneohe was developed a little bit more recently in the 70s and 80s. I feel like the development and the infrastructure was built to prevent flooding because, Kaneohe does rain a lot. We know that a lot of rain is going to happen on a regular basis. I feel like they built it so that, damage wouldn't be done. And for the most part, it seems like most of the windward side was okay, except for the areas that are close to the water where it's very low. But this is just my theory. I think certain areas are more prone to flooding because of various infrastructure, the topography, and the weather. And so it's going to affect the state differently. Now, one area that has really been hit is the North Shore, and I'll bring up the map here. So the North Shore is like a point, but like the area, if you go just slightly west of the point in the North Shore, there's an area called Wailua, Haleiwa, and there's one other town. I'm sorry, it's just not hitting me. Haleiwa, Wailua, if someone knows. A few areas here that were really hit. I'm going to show some footage. So this area, if you're not as familiar with Oahu, is country. Like, this is what we call the country, and it's less populated. So houses are more spread out. The area, I don't think is as infrastructure heavy as like the suburbs, like where I'm from. And the houses they tended to be built up. So there's like a 2, maybe 3 foot space that was put there so that water wouldn't get into the house. But at this level, the houses did get flooded. And so it seems like on Oahu, this area has been getting the most reaction, the most anger, because there wasn't as much or very little, if any, warning. And we heard about this with Lahaina. There was no warning. There's a very robust siren system that they could sound, and everyone on the island hears it. And they test it all the time. And there's also other things that can be done before a storm surge happens or a storm happens. And it has to do with clearing out the infrastructure so that the drainages are clear and things can go where they're supposed to go. For example, the Department of Sanitation here in LA, they clear out the plumbing so that there's no overflow. I know this because before one of our storms, right outside of my house, there is a huge manhole that the Department of Sanitation was servicing before the storm, and the house actually started to smell like sewage. So I actually went out there and asked, what are you guys doing? And they said, well, the storm is coming, so we just, there's this process that we do to make sure that the sewage doesn't get overflowed. and that the smell was there was like an air pocket within the sewage system. So just flush the toilet a couple times, it should go away. But I don't know if this happened in Hawaii. And when you hear the mayors speaking, I haven't heard of them doing a lot of pre-planning. That doesn't mean it didn't happen, but it kind of seems like there was a lack of planning, a lack of warning, and so far a lack of response from the government. And so here's one of the meetings from the Wailua area, North Shore.
We couldn't drive the trucks in there. What would you do? So I'll tell you what we did do.
Don't point fingers at us. What we did everything.
I know you did.
So don't ask us what we did. We did everything.
Exhausted and exasperated from washing down streets and homes, Tuesday night, North Shore families demanded an apology, accusing the city of a slow emergency response.
Can I just have an apology from all of the law enforcement and everybody here sitting in just on one man at a time? Just one man at a time. Apology, police, fire department, EPA, you. Just one man at a time, please.
Honolulu Mayor Rick Langiardi defended his departments, saying crews have been working around the clock.
We're trying to throw everything at this we possibly can. We're getting better by the day because there's so much to learn. But I also believe that we don't know everything.
Since the weekend, the city has hauled more than 3,000 tons of debris in about 100 truckloads to temporary dump sites.
But one thing I can see is your community is strong. Very, very strong. And our officers are here to support that.
Despite the assistance, many community members say it's neighbors who've stepped up the most.
The community deserves, I think, a huge amount of credit for helping each other. And it is typical that government is slower to respond.
I think we are gathering together and we do a better job than the government.
I think our government is more inclusive with our communities now, but I think we have a lot of work to do, for sure.
A nurse practitioner on Oahu's North Shore says she and other community members are using canoes to reach stranded residents and homeless.
They're not being accounted for. They don't have a GoFundMe. They don't have an Instagram. They're not getting interviewed. They're old. They're elderly. There's children and animals still stuck out there. My friends had to swim out. I really want to advocate for them because we can't even get to them still.
The Hawaii National Guard says they've made about 140 air and ground rescues and are providing 400 and 800-gallon water tank trailers at 4 North Shore schools. Meanwhile, the Army is providing water for Otaki Camp residents and Schofield Barracks.
But honestly, we're giving it our best shot. And if we learn tonight there are additional things we can do, we will do them. I would hope, and I think, from what I heard today, people are seeing that.
If your home or property suffered damage from the Kona Low storms, submit a damage report at ready.hawaii.gov/Kona Low.
Human error. Yeah, there's another clip I could play that says that they got these very confusing messages like, oh, the dam's going to break, and then it's not. There's a dam in the Wailua area that Dole Plantation owns. It was built in, I think, 1908, and it hasn't been repaired or updated or maintained for some time. And so the state has been trying to take the dam. Dole doesn't want to just give it to them, although the repairs are expensive. They're in the $20 million range. But I think now there'll be more pressure for Dole to hand over the dam. Before, tourism was a big industry in Hawaii. Sugarcane and pineapple were the biggest industries. And so they, Dole was a major landowner, and they controlled a lot of, politics and everything. But now that they're not that's not a big moneymaker for Hawaii anymore, it's not as profitable. Pineapples are grown cheaper in other parts of the world. So I do see the state taking that over, which does fit in with the Agenda 2030, the government taking over irrigation, farming, food supply, and just, kind of having a stronghold on infrastructure and the ability for people to produce their own food and have access to fresh water. So, these things do fall into the agenda quite nicely. Just one more thing before we go on to that, because the Nebraska fires really do lay into that. I think when you look at the island, if you're looking at it from a standpoint of this being deliberate and in order to take over certain areas, I would think the area of Honolulu, like the area right like south of Aiea, in very populated areas, very old areas. It's very valuable land. A lot of these families have owned their properties for multiple generations. And if they're still holding on to their land, it keeps the area from being, redeveloped or modernized. And I know that there is a push to, modernize Honolulu more rapidly. And the area between, like, if you look at Pearl City down to probably like downtown, they're building a rail there, which I don't think it's ever going to get finished. But those are areas that they're trying to revitalize. And I think they're trying to bring gambling and increase tourism in this area, in those areas. So, but the areas that are really affected, there is farming still going on there, which probably a lot of those farmers will have to move, and they've already lost a lot of their ability to continue, especially if their structure is not livable anymore. So then that kind of takes us into the next event, which is the Nebraska fire. So Shane, I'm going to switch over to the fire one. And then you're going to have to add.
All right.
Okay. And then Shane's going to speak on this one.
All right. So as you guys have probably heard, for the last at least a couple weeks now, I think it was the 12th or the 13th, a fire started in Nebraska, and it quickly grew to over 800,000 acres at this point. That makes it a megafire, and that was the Morrill fire. But then there was also the Cottonwood fire, which has also grown to over 100,000 acres, which makes those two megafires. They qualify as megafires. Anything over 100,000 acres is a megafire. And now there's two new fires that are each about 30 to 40,000 acres as well. So in total, we now have over 1 million acres that have burned in Nebraska. And that's really within a 2-week period. And it's almost unprecedented. The only time that I can recall ever seeing a fire acreage this large in that small amount of time would be like the Texas Smokehouse Creek fire. So very fast fires that were spread by like 80 to 90 mile an hour winds. There was also some gusts, I think, that were over 100 miles an hour. All right. So now that caused a lot of displacement of over 40,000 cattle. Now, I think that's actually just beef cattle, and that doesn't actually include like the horses or the wildlife. So there was a lot of, animals that were displaced, including 40,000 beef cattle, which is going to severely affect the food supply in the next season here. So we're going to probably see prices on food and, meat go through the roof. All right. So now I want to go into a little bit of the fire behavior. Let's see here. We do have some stuff I want to show. There is a home that was engulfed, and you can see how the trees around it are not on fire. There's not a lot of leaves on the trees, but it is still kind of early in the spring. So I'm really not sure if those burned away a little bit or if they just hadn't bloomed yet. But it does look like mostly the house was on fire and not really much else around it, except for some of the grass. And the grass itself actually is kind of patchy. All right. So now as far as the fire behavior goes, there was a trail cam that was discovered with the data card that was actually still intact. And he was able to pull some pictures off of that SD card. And this one is actually before the fire started. You can see like an orange glow on this brush here. I don't think that's necessarily the brush itself glowing. I think it's just reflecting the red light from the fire, which is probably behind the camera. But within a few minutes of this photo, it actually did ignite. And you can see the ignition all around the camera here. And then just a few seconds after that, you can see the fire actually started to die down. And that's indicative of how fast a brush fire actually burns. It goes out very quickly. So it doesn't actually stay on fire that long. All right. So now, as far as the cause of this fire, it's being blamed on a downed power line. There was significant winds that were enough to topple power lines, and this particular power line is the one that's being blamed. You can see it's laying in a scorched area that stretches off into the horizon, and they're claiming that this power line came down and the wind did the rest. And so they're saying that all of the fire damage that we see is responsible from the wind carrying the fire from this point. Now, I do have a few weird little anomalies to show. This is a fireman's helmet that I believe was dropped and burned. And I think fire helmets are maybe metal or something fireproof. And this one's got a lot of damage to it. So it looks like it was in a very, very hot fire. Another anomaly that we see in this fire is the really patchy nature to the burn. It does not look like it was wind-driven. A wind-driven fire would have really wide swaths of complete black, especially if it was a grass fire like this. The patchiness of this fire is reminiscent of something that Jeff Snyder talks about, which he calls plasma fire. And when he gets up close in his videos, you can see that some of these actually look like lightning bolt patterns or, electricity patterns. So that could be an indication that there is some sort of plasma at play here. Another anomaly that I want to show is that the trees were burning from the inside. This is a close-up of this one particular tree. I don't know exactly what kind it is, but it's probably a water-loving tree. And you can see the flames are coming from the inside here. There's another image of that same tree just from zoomed out a little bit more. And now in this picture, you can see that mostly only the grass is scorched, but this tree trunk also is smoking near the top. And it looks like it might have actually burned from the inside because the bark on the outside looks relatively intact, except for a spot near the bottom and a spot near the top. I also have another picture of a tree that was cut down. These are very relatively young trees, but it's hard to see. I should have zoomed in on this image, but they do have a very large amount of heartwood. I showed this to Robert Brame, the forensic arborist, and he said, based on the age of this tree and the amount of heartwood, it has an unusually large amount of heartwood in this tree. Another anomaly that we found was the fence post was burned mostly where the wire wrapping was. So this has got a barbed wire that was wrapped around it at the bottom. And it looks like the wrap was more significant at the bottom than it would have been at the top. And that's where the fence post burned, was where the wraps were more significant.
And then Shane, really quick, just mention there's a video we did with Robert that goes into detail on why these are anomalies and things like that.
Okay, yeah.
Why these things are.
We have two, I think, or perhaps three now videos with Robert Brame where he goes into detail about the anomalies that he's found, and it's very similar to these that we just showed.
Yeah, I'll link it on the screen or something.
Yeah. So these fence posts look like they're mostly burned from the top, although there are some that are burned in the middle or near the bottom, and that's probably where the fence was fastened to them. We often find that, the fasteners are usually an ignition point for some reason. And then another anomaly that I found, this looks like a mobile home or something that was on a steel frame. These are steel I-beams, and a lot of them are drooped, and some of them you can even see have a little bit of a twist to them. We've seen this twisted beam phenomenon several times in the past, including LA and Lahaina. And then this is another metal building that's pretty much only has the metal parts of it left. So yeah, everything else is gone except for the trees behind them actually still look like they're in pretty good shape. There's some greenery on the trees. And then one more anomaly that I wanted to show is this horse trailer in the background that's white and it's all burned up and it has some like rust on it. Looks like it might have oxidized rapidly in this fire. And then it didn't do nearly as well as the red trailer in the foreground. They both look like they're sitting in scorched grass. And then one other thing I wanted to point out is that we often see relief funds that are set up, usually in affiliation with the Red Cross or with the state community funds, that tend to be, have the strong name. And these strong funds like Lahaina Strong and LA Strong and so forth usually tie back to these community funds that are really closely tied to the developers. And a lot of times, instead of going straight to the victims, these funds will actually go toward the redevelopment instead. So we do not recommend that you donate to Nebraska Strong. If you know any victims that have a GoFundMe or a Venmo, I highly recommend donating directly to the victims.
Okay, is that That's it for the fire.
That's it for the fire.
Yeah, and we're to me that's pretty obvious. It's food supply destruction driven. Last was it 2024? There was a massive fire in Texas, the Smokehouse Creek fire that burned over 1 million acres of cattle grazing land. And so again, we're seeing this squeeze on the ability for our country to produce our own like high quality food. And unlike the lab made options that have been introduced into the supermarkets. Okay, and so the last event we'll talk about is the Valero oil refinery fire. And I have some footage of this. This is the largest oil refinery in the U.S. and it's in Texas in Port Arthur. And this is the Valero oil refinery plant. And people are starting to take notice of this. What makes this one with the timing so sorry, that's my dog. I can't. What makes it so suspicious is that, we're at war, and there was a tweet, and I'll stop this to put the tweet up. This was put up on X 45 minutes before this fire started. And it's by this account that I think they took down their content shortly after the fire started. But it says, within a week, the largest gas refinery in the U.S., Motiva Enterprises in the city of Port Arthur, Texas, on the U.S. Gulf Coast would be destroyed. Save the tweet. So, I mean, I don't know why. I'm not sure why someone would put that aside from maybe trying to point blame on a certain country or entity. I'm not sure. So we don't know if this first could be an accident. I think they're trying to say it's an accident. It could be Iran. It could be the Saudis. It could be, our ally in the Middle East. It could be, people that represent the U.S. I don't think we'll ever find out. But the thing I wanted to point out, and this is just some of the background as to when this started. This is another one. What I wanted to point out that I don't think a lot of people are aware of is that this is part of a string or a trend of oil refinery fires. So California had 3 in 2025. These were big ones. One was Chevron. There was Hayward. I'll get to it when I pull it up. But here, this is the Chevron oil refinery in El Segundo. And I think very recently, Chevron has moved their operations to Texas because Texas is easier to do business in. But yeah, this explosion was huge. A lot of people heard it. It's in the South Bay of Los Angeles. And I think this is kind of the end of their operations, and they're going to move. A lot of the refineries have said California has so many regulations and rules and fines and, special specifications as to how they do business, and it costs a lot of money. And it's just much cheaper for them to move out of state. California actually produces most of its gasoline. It does most of the refinery process, but gets most of their gas overseas or from Tehran, as far as where they wanted to do business. And then the other big one was in Hayward, California, which is in Northern California. This was in December. Got the company. So PG&E detected the gas. I'm not sure if they figured out exactly who who did it, but this was what was the company? Oh, okay, this was natural gas. Asphalt milling. Okay, so this was a gas line. Okay, so this was an oil refinery, I'm sorry, but this is also something that affects the energy production in California. And there was another one years ago in Porter Ranch. And so I just feel like these are happening like so often. The one in Porter Ranch, people moved out of their home temporarily because the air was so bad. And then one more. Oh, wait, here's the Hayward. Okay, so this was an explosion. And I don't know if they figured out what this was, if it really just was a gas leak. But I wanted to point out that there's so many.
Refinery in Contra Costa County over the weekend. Fire injured 6 people and prompted a strong shelter-in-place order from the health department. You can see that thick black smoke coming out of it. Investigators say it was all caused because of a leak of hydrocarbon material.
But this isn't the first time this refinery has had issues. KCRA 3's Ryan Curry joins us live in the newsroom. So, Ryan, what's the history here and what's the fallout?
Yeah, good afternoon. Multiple government agencies have been investigating this refinery for a few years for different incidents harming the local environment. According to Contra Costa County, on Thanksgiving Day in 2022, the refinery released around 20 tons of toxic chemicals into the air. That prompted investigations from the EPA and FBI. This past October, MRC agreed to pay over $4 million to settle allegations that it violated the Clean Water Act. They were accused by state regulators for dumping wastewater into nearby watersheds. And now, this past weekend's fire sent a huge plume of black smoke into the air. The county issued a level 3 shelter-in-place warning, its highest level. Several of these incidents, including the one over the weekend, are still being investigated by the local health department. Following the 2022 Thanksgiving Day event, the county says the refinery has reported 21 incidents of chemical releases or spills.
Okay, so that was the refinery, and that one was in February of last year. Okay, I don't have the stats on that one, but I live in California now, and I felt like last year was just unusually large amount of energy producing plants going on, exploding, catching fire, and then going out of business. And, maybe there is some sort of accidental phenomena going on, but maybe these are being targeted. And because there are so many other industries being targeted in this way, it really is starting to seem like this is an attack on our food supply, our energy production, our ability to produce energy. And, at a time when we really can't afford for things to get more expensive. And I watched Man in America, Seth Holhouse did one on, he's big into prepping and, being ready for the grid to go down or, food shortages and just being, having to, sustain yourself. And he does think that it is time that he suggests that everyone get prepared to be independent and find a community that can support each other without depending on, the grid and having to go to chain stores. Was there anything? I feel like I missed something on the Port Arthur. Okay, this is one more on the Port Arthur fire. And I think this is kind of positive in that it's fairly contained. So this refinery is massive. It takes up a huge amount of space in Texas. And I know, Shane, you said there are ways for them to like prevent the spread.
Yeah, in an event of emergency, they have all sorts of emergency shutoff valves, which will prevent the fire from spreading to nearby facilities. So that's why you see it like contained to those like 2 or 3 small areas right there, even though it's a large plant.
Okay, so it might not be they have to shut this facility down. It might mean it kind of will slow down production, but I don't think the whole, um, yeah, I don't think the infrastructure is completely done. So I'm trying not to be so doom and gloom because it's easy to kind of go in that direction and think everything is just, we're just so screwed. But um, a lot of times when I look into these events, things aren't always what they seem from the headlines or seen, on the surface. Sometimes they're like, for example, this one, when I saw the footage, it looked like it might not be so bad. And so I wanted to make sure I showed that. Chevron is opening the drilling off Santa Barbara in April, running it to El Segundo. Oh, right. There's offshore drilling. I did read Governor Newsom approved the, I think, 11 new drilling sites in California. I heard they're mostly in Kern County, which is north of Los Angeles, but that there is approval for offshore drilling. So, that idea is kind of scary to me, but it kind of seems like there might be, if you're in California with all of these going on, there might not be a choice if there isn't another option or there aren't more plants or drill sites, wells that can be produced here. Going to the Middle East and depending on other countries has become much harder with the situation in Iran. So it just might have to be what it takes to sustain our society. But was there anything else that I was going to mention?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head, but I wanted to add real quick that they are claiming that the Port Arthur explosion was a complete accident, but it does kind of look like that tweet that came out ahead of time. This tweet was actually tweeted at 5:45 p.m. Eastern, and I think the explosion didn't happen until about 6:30 p.m., and that might have been either Eastern or Central time, but that would make this tweet before the actual explosion. So to me, that's pretty much evidence that it's not an accident.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what would be the motivation for a platform to say that? Well, because you're kind of implicating yourself in it.
Yeah, so it sounds like someone might have had like some inside information, although it was at the last minute. They thought there was like a whole week of timeline, perhaps, when really they only had like 45 minutes or so. So it looks like, if they're posting within an hour of the actual event, they might have been like one of the last ones to find out, and we're trying to get the word out. So maybe they were trying to legit warn people. And that person actually did not only delete their tweet, but they deleted, I guess, 47,000 tweets that they had on their Twitter or X page. So yeah, they pretty much deleted all their tweets, but we do have a record of that one.
I mean, they can easily be tracked down and investigated and find out, how did they know this?
Yeah, you would think that any credible investigative agency would follow that lead.
Yeah, I feel like there's a reason that it came from a certain kind of account, and I don't know. I just find that there was that post kind of hard to explain. Exxon Valdez Deepwater Horizon. I think, okay, I'll read do we have any comments you wanted me to read or questions?
Well, there's a few starred comments. Let's see if I can find some questions here. Let's see. How much is gas in Hawaii? That much I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I know in California, where I'm in Los Angeles, the generic gas station down the street. So this is like the cheapest station that I know of is 5.60 something a gallon for that's the least expensive for the 87, and that's the highest I remember it ever going. So it is very, very, very high. Okay, I'll put some of these up. I won't read them. Dutch sins. Yeah, I know he's really under the gun for, you know, I know he was like contacted by the authorities and offered like $3,000 to not post or something. So
I believe he was approached by the Air Force, and yeah, they did try to tell him to stop. And maybe he did for a little while, but he's back.
yeah, I think he might be being surveilled very closely. But I mean, if he wants to, I'd love to get some of his insight, because what he does and what we do really go hand in hand. Hold on.
All right, let's see here. Yeah, I think this is in response to the Benicia refinery that's shutting down, PBF Energy and Chevron. And then here it says in the 80s, number of operating crude oil refineries in the United States was over 250 at the beginning of the decade, but it declined to around 30 by the end of the decade. So it's a huge loss.
Yeah, Hayward Gas was a gas line, not the first in Northern California. Gas line, yeah. I don't know if anyone from Southern California remembers that Porter Ranch gas leak. That was a major situation. There'll be a blackout. Yeah, a lot of, I meant to say battery plants exploded recently in the last couple of years. And I didn't want to go into too much, but also the food processing plants. I know there's an egg processing plant like on fire now
in Iowa,
and the chicken processing plants, and yeah, anything to do with food and energy. I feel like there's a attack on.
There was also an outage in Orange County, I believe.
Power outage.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's been fixed, but it was out for a number of hours.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I think I'm gonna have to cut it there. I have a situation here, but thank you guys so much for joining. If you haven't subscribed, please do so before you leave. Please share this video, especially if you know people on Oahu and Hawaii that are affected. So they, I feel like people in Hawaii are starting to wake up and starting to see what's really happening. And I was really proud to see the community standing up to the mayor and demanding help, because I think historically the people of Hawaii are very trusting and just put all their faith in the government. And I think they're starting to see that that was a mistake, and there needs to be a stronger push and a lot of questions asked as far as why certain things weren't done and why are they left to fend for themselves. And I saw some clips, I didn't put it here today, but a lot of them comparing what's happening to Lahaina. A lot of them are saying, well, what happened to Lahaina is happening here. And I think a lot of them are waking up. So please share this video. And then we did more on the engineering aspect in our previous video. So the last one that says Hawaii storm. So yeah, that's going to do it. Thank you guys so much for being here, and we will see you all soon. I will be back live Monday, planning for Monday at 3. So thank you guys, and we'll see you all soon. Bye.
They piece it together, they ask why.